Hi guys, in this video lecture we will discuss about one of the important part of the digestive system, that is about the esophagus. As we ingest the food substances into the mouth, so this food substance inside the mouth, it will partially digest or chemical or mechanical digestion of these food substance started in the mouth. So from the mouth, this food substance, it will pass from the pharynx and enter to the a muscular tube. So now this muscular tube that is present between the pharynx and stomach, this muscular tube, it is basically called as esophagus. As you can see here, this is the structure of the digestive system. So here's this muscular tube. As you can see here, this is actually the esophagus, while the part of the digestive system that is present after this esophagus, it is called as stomach. So stomach, it is a muscular pouch that is present after the esophagus, while here this is the small intestine, and this is basically the first part of the small intestine that is called as duodenum. But this lecture we will mainly focus on this muscular tube that is called as esophagus. So the first one, we will define what is the proper definition of esophagus. So it is a muscular tube which connects the pharynx with the stomach. So basically it is a muscular tube which is mainly present between the pharynx and the stomach. So this muscular tube, it is basically called as esophagus. Next point regarding to the esophagus, that is the word esophagus, it is basically mean that any passage for the food substance, this is basically called as esophagus. So literally it means that the passage for the foods. So the other term that is used mainly for the esophagus, that is, it is also known as collet or food pipe. So this is basically called as collet or food pipe. One of the part that is present in the respiratory system, that is called as air pipe. The air pipe. Now the term air pipe, it is used for the trachea, while food pipe, it is used for the esophagus. Now what is the length of the esophagus? So basically its length depends on the length of the neck. So if we have the organism that have a long neck, so the length of the esophagus will be also increase. But we have the organism that have a short neck, so the size of the esophagus, it will have so it is also decrease. So suppose we have a giraffe. So giraffe, they have a such long neck. So here the large length of the esophagus, it is found in such organism. But if we talk about the human, so it is about 24.5 centimeter, or you can say 10-inch in length. If we talk about the diameter of the esophagus, so it is basically 2 centimeter and diameters. Next point regarding to the esophagus, that is, it is endodermal and origins. So right at the embryonic stages, the embryo possesses three layers, that is endoderm, mesoderm and ectoderm. So basically right from the endoderm, the origin of esophagus occur from this layer, that is basically the endoderms. So if we talk about the location where this esophagus or food pipe, it is found in our body, so basically this is present in the thoracic region. So thoracic region, it is basically called as right at the chest region. So right at the chest region, it is present in front of the vertebral columns. So this is about the location where the esophagus, it is found in our body. The next point that is mainly related to the esophagus, that is about the muscle found in the wall of the esophagus. So if we talk about the esophagus, so right at the esophagus, there are two types of muscle found in the esophagus. The first, right at the starting part of the esophagus, right at the upper part of the esophagus, that is found present near the pharynx. So here stratified muscle are present. So you can say the skeleton muscle. So striated muscle that possess dark and light bands. So such type of the muscle that are called as striated muscle. So basically striated muscle are voluntary in natures. But if we talk about the lower part of the esophagus, so the lower part of the esophagus, it will possess the muscle that is basically the smooth muscle. Smooth muscle are basically non-striated muscle. It means that this muscle don't have a dark and white bands. So here's these muscle are basically involuntary in nature. So it means that the upper part of the esophagus, it is under our controls, but the lower part of the esophagus have the muscle that are actually does not under our controls. But in case if we talk about the ruminants, it include camel, sheep, goat, etc. that are included in the ruminants. So right at the ruminant, the entire wall contains striated muscles. So the all esophagus wall, it will possess the striated muscle. It means that they have a dark and white bands. So here's these muscle are basically the voluntary muscle. So right in the ruminants, they will regurgitate their food content right from the stomach into their mouth. So because of this striated muscle, they are found in their esophagus walls. Now the next point, that is esophageal sphincters. Sphincters are basically the valves that are mainly found in the esophagus. So first of all, what is sphincter? So sphincter are basically the muscle that surround the tube and serve as a valve. So these are basically the muscle that are surround the esophagus or muscular tube, and they act as a valves. So here the sphincter, when these muscle that are found in the esophagus, so these sphincter, when these muscle, or you can say the sphincter, it will contact. So when these are contract, so it will close the esophagus openings. But when these sphincter muscle that are relaxed, so it will open these esophagus muscles. So there are two main process that are involved in the sphincter muscle. So when the sphincter muscle, it will contact, it will close the esophagus or this muscular tube. So when these sphincter muscle that are found in the esophagus, it will relax, so it will open the valve of the esophagus. So here's two type of the sphincter muscle are found in the esophagus. The first one, that is upper esophageal sphincters. As the name indicate, it is present right in the upper part of the esophagus. So that's why it is called as upper esophageal sphincters. So it is also known as caricopharyngeal sphincters, as these sphincters that are located near the cartilage, that is caricocartilage, that is present here. So that's why it is called as caricopharyngeal sphincters. Now the next point related to the upper esophageal sphincter, that is about the location. So this is basically present at the top of esophagus. So here the connection between the pharynx and the esophagus. So these upper esophageal sphincter that are located between the pharynx and the esophagus. Next, what is the function of the upper esophageal sphincters? So prevent air passing into the esophagus during inspiration. So during inspiration, when we intake the airs, so these airs, these wall are present. Now these wall are basically, it will prevent the flow of air into the esophagus. So when this sphincter, it will close the esophagus, due to which the air, it will enter into the trachea. So it will basically prevent the air flow into the esophagus. Now the next sphincter that is present in the esophagus, that is the lower esophageal sphincters. Now the first one, that is the other term used for this lower esophageal sphincter, that is called as gastroesophageal or chordic sphincters. So why it is called as gastroesophageal or chordic sphincters? So as this sphincter, it is present near the stomach, that's why it is called as gastroesophageal sphincters. Now the next name, that is chordic sphincter. So why it is called as chordic sphincters? As this sphincter, it is located near the hearts, because here it is present near this sphincter, so that's why it is called as chordic sphincters. Next point be regarding to the lower esophageal sphincter, that is the location where this is present. So as This is located at the junction of esophagus and stomachs. So here this is the muscular tube. Now this muscular tube, it is basically the esophagus. So right here it is actually the top of the esophagus. Now this is called as upper esophageal sphincters or cricopharyngeal sphincter. So this is present here. While the lower esophageal sphincter or gastropharyngeal or cardiac sphincter, it is located between the pharynx, between the esophagus and the stomach. So right here it is located. So this is the location of the lower esophageal sphincters. Next, what is the function of the lower esophageal sphincters? So it prevents the stomach content from the flowing back into the esophagus. So here the food substances, they will the digestion of the food substances, it will occur in the stomach. So here the food content, it is present right in the stomachs. So here these walls are sphincter, it is present. So this sphincter, it will actually prevent the flow of food content or stomach content into the esophagus. So this is actually the function of lower esophageal sphincter. But in rare condition, while in the vomiting state, so here this sphincter, it will occurs, due to which vomiting occurs. So this is about the sphincter of the esophagus. Now the next one, that is about the layer of esophagus. So when we cross the esophagus, so here's the four type of the layers that are present in the esophagus. The outermost layer, that is called as adventitia. So inner to this adventitia muscularis layer, it is present. So inside the muscularis submucosa is present, and the innermost layer, that is called as mucosa. So basically the esophagus, it will possess four layer. The outermost is adventitia, inner to the adventitia muscularis, and submucosa, and the inner one, that is mucosa layer. So let us discuss this layer. The first one, that is adventitia. Now this is actually the outermost layer of the esophagus. So here it will the primary function of this adventitia layer of the esophagus, so basically it will attach the esophagus to the nearby part of the body. So here's this layer, it is present. So the main primary function of this layer, it will basically attach the esophagus to the part present near to this esophagus. So basically it will provide an attachment to the esophagus. The next layer, that is muscularis layers. So here this is present inside to the adventitia. So here two type of the muscle, it is present in this layer. One is circular muscle, and the other one, that is longitudinal muscles. So what is the function of muscularis layers? So actually these circular and longitudinal muscle, it will contract and relax, due to which it will push the food down into the stomach. So due to the relaxation and contraction of this muscle, it will push the food substance down into the stomach. The next layer, that is submucosal layer. So submucosal layer, it is basically present into the inner side of the muscularis layers. So here it will contain the glands. So these glands are actually, it will secrete the mucus. So mucus, it will actually moist the layer, the internal wall of the esophagus. So basically the gland that are present in the esophagus, so basically the submucosal layer, here the gland are located. Now the innermost layer, that is called as mucosa layers. So this is basically the innermost layer. So what is the function of this mucosa layer? So moist, to help the food passes smoothly into the stomach. So as we have already talked about that, the gland are present in the submucosal layers. So this gland, it will secrete the mucus. So this is layer, it is actually, it will in direct contact with the food substances. So this gland, it will secrete this mucus, and this mucus, it will actually moist this mucosa layer. So when this mucus, it will secrete it, now this mucus, it will actually moist the mucosa layer, due to which it will help in the passage of food. So due to which the food substance, it will easily pass through the esophagus and enter into the stomach. So this is actually the layer of esophagus. So this is basically the structure representation of the four layer of the esophagus. So this is actually the outermost layer, that is called as adventitia. So inner to the adventitia, the muscular layer is present. So here this is actually the muscular layers. Now this muscular, it will basically consist two type of the muscle. One is longitudinal muscle, so this is actually the longitudinal muscles, while the next one, that is actually the circular muscle. So these are actually the two type of the muscle found in the muscularis layers. So inner to the muscularis layers, the submucosa layer present. So this blue color, it will show the submucosa layers, while the innermost layer, it is called as mucosa. So mucosa, it is further divided into the three layers. The inner one, that is epithelial lining, the second one, that is muscularis mucosa, and the third one, that is lamina propria, the innermost layer, that is mucosa. So mucosa, it is further divided into three layers. Because of the limited time, we skip these three layers. Be sure we easily explain the mucosa layer. So here the mucosa, these are actually the further divided into three layers. The innermost, that is epithelial. So outside to this epithelial lining, lamina propria is present, while the outermost layer of the mucosa, it is actually the muscularis mucosa. So muscularis mucosa, it is present between the submucosa and the mucous layers. So this is the overall fourth layer present in the esophagus. So finally, what is the function of esophagus? So here are the some of the function that is performed by the esophagus, as the wall present or the sphincter present and the esophagus. So what are the function of this wall and overall the function of esophagus we will discuss here. So the first function, that is upper esophageal sphincter relaxation, allow the bolus to move from the pharynx into the esophagus as the food substance that we will ingest it. Now this food substance, it is partially digested. Now this partially digested food substance, it is called as bolus. Now these upper esophageal sphincter that are present between the pharynx and the esophagus, so in this sphincter muscle, it will relax. Due to the relaxation of the upper esophageal sphincter, so the wall or this sphincter, it will open, so due to which this bolus, it will enter from, it will move from the pharynx into the esophagus. So this is the first function of the esophagus. Next function, that is about the peristalsis. So peristalsis, it is basically the muscular contraction of the esophagus, it is called as peristalsis. Now peristalsis process, it will occur in this esophagus, due to which it will propel the bolus through the esophagus. Due to the action of this peristalsis, the bolus, it will easily pass through the esophagus. The third function, that is the lower esophageal sphincter relaxations. So here at the lower side of the esophagus, the cardiac sphincter or lower esophageal sphincter is present. So in this sphincter muscle, it will relax. Due to their relaxation, the bolus, it will move from the esophagus and will finally enter into the large part of the digestive tract, that is called as stomach. Now the bolus, it will finally enter into the stomach. Now the last function, that is mucus secretion, as we have already studied, and the layers of esophagus, that is the submucosa layer. So right in the submucosa layer, the mucus gland and the gland are located. Now these gland, it will actually secrete the mucus. Now what are the function of these mucus? So this mucus, it will actually lubricate the esophagus. Now in this esophagus, it will moist or lubricates. Due to this moisten action, the esophagus, it will allow easy passage to the bolus. Due to their moistening action of the mucus gland, the esophagus, it will easily allow the bolus to move through the esophagus. So this is actually the overall about the esophagus. So if you have any question regarding to the esophagus, you can ask in the comment section. Thank you so much.